Welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today is Kimberly Setzer with Amorem. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about grief and the holidays.
Correct.
I know for people who are grieving, the holidays can be a very difficult time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know that people are already feeling anxious and restless about the holidays coming up. Thanksgiving, Christmas, everything in between.
And we all have traditions that we've always done. If we're grieving, dealing with the loss, should we continue to keep all of our holiday traditions?
That's a hard question, but a very valid one, and one that we discuss with folks all the time. So what our suggestion for that is to literally sit down with pen and paper and make a list of what your traditions are in your family and go through those and decide what's most important and prioritize those. What we know is that grievers, especially in the holidays, are operating on a limited energy level, as well as dealing with a lot of really intense emotion. And so realistically, it's very hard for people to continue all of the same traditions. And then logistically, most of the time we're not even able to do that because there's at least one person missing, which is usually the source of our grief. In recent years, and this will continue through this year, we're also having to take into consideration COVID, and we're continuing to deal with that. We're continuing to deal with restrictions, difficulties with travel, having to be very cautious of being around groups of people. And so that is certainly impacting our traditions and how we celebrate special days in our life as well. So what we really encourage folks to do is to literally sit down and be able to prioritize what's the most important events, how are we going to execute those as a family, and to keep some traditions, to look at what is really important to keep for you and your family, and then maybe to introduce some new traditions, to find some new ways to celebrate, to be together, to offer support to one another. A lot of times we also know that it's really hard to be happy and to be in that celebrating mode and to join with other folks. And so just be intentional to have a plan. What we encourage folks to do is make that list, prioritize what's important, and then put those items on a calendar. And be sure that you're intentional to schedule time for rest and recovery between events or gatherings or your traditions.
For people who are grieving, what are ways they can do special things to remember their loved ones?
Yeah. That's really important for folks. So one of the myths of grief is that we're trying to forget things or we're trying to move on. We're not at all trying to encourage people to forget that this special person, for many, that special people, they're grieving more than one loss. We're not trying to forget that those folks were ever here. We're actually trying to do the opposite. We're trying to find some sort of balance between remembering, honoring, building a legacy and honoring that legacy for those folks while also enjoying the time that's right in front of us. And for a lot of people, that's an extremely difficult balance to find. And so we say, be intentional to keep your loved one part of your celebration, part of your gatherings. And so people do that in a variety of ways. Some people, I know, will set a place at the table for that person. Some people will make a service project opportunity for their family in honor and in memory of that person. Some people will buy a candle and it'll burn all day. And so we also see a lot of people put out pictures or go through memory books. They may share memories together. So there's lots of ways to do that. But what we encourage people to do is not to focus on it being extravagant, that it doesn't have to be super costly, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a way to remember someone that we loved or a few people that we loved that are no longer physically present with us, but we want to keep them part of our lives, and we want to say their name and we want to honor their memory.
As we're talking about grief, a lot of people think after the first Thanksgiving or the first Christmas, it should be better, but that's not the case.
It's not always the case. Sometimes that is true for people. Sometimes that year of first, the time frame from when that loss occurred to the 1 year anniversary, it is very difficult. We're doing things differently. We're overwhelmed. We're trying to learn to cope with our grief and our loss. We're trying to adjust to a completely new life a lot of times, in addition to all the other things that we're doing in life, whether that be work, have a family, take care of things, go to school, pay our bills, all those normal stressors. But for a lot of people, it's more than a year, and it's an ongoing. The other thing that we find is people tend to extend us some grace that first year and remember that our loss has occurred, and they're intentional to reach out and offer support. And after that year, we know that normally that support really starts to fall off. And so if you know somebody who's had a loss in the last year, the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, continue to reach out to them and offer that support.
What kinds of support can people offer to friends, family members who are grieving?
Yeah, so I really encourage people to look at that from an individual perspective. If there's something that person or that family needs or that would greatly benefit them, of course, gifts are always nice. But the reality is a lot of us don't need anything tangible. And so some options are to make a donation in memory of that person to a local nonprofit or to a cause that you're passionate about or that person was passionate about. We see that a lot. There's several local organizations that benefit from those gifts every year. You can do something to remember that person, whether it be, I went and volunteered at this organization for the day in memory of this person, and then send a card with that information. But I think the most basic thing is to give a phone call or to go do an in-person visit. And just spend time with someone. So one thing that we share with folks who are trying to support grievers, because that's always difficult for us, is just to show up, be present. But don't be offended if people are a little more withdrawn, if they're not as talkative or they're not as interactive as they normally are. They really have a lot on their mind and they're trying to adjust to a lot. But just show up and be present. Give a call before you go. Make sure it's okay. Make sure it's a good day or that they're comfortable with visitors that day. But spend time with somebody. Take them out to lunch. Take them out to dinner. Offer to go to an event with them where they don't have to sit alone if they've lost a spouse or significant other. Just think of, if you were in their shoes, what would be nice or what would be helpful for you. And usually that's an okay thing to do.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm thinking back to the actual holiday celebrations. What ways do you suggest maybe those be altered a little bit so that it's, I don't want to say toned down, but maybe you make it a little bit easier for yourself?
Yeah, so some very practical suggestions are that if you're invited to events, you may want to RSVP with a maybe. So we normally say, people that are inviting you to events know that you're grieving. And so you just say maybe. And if they need a definite, then it's probably going to be no. Because I can't tell you today how I'm going to feel or how I'm going to be handling my grief 3 weeks from today. But I understand that you may need a head count to be able to make preparations or make plans for that event. And so RSVP with maybes. If you don't like to drive or you're not comfortable driving or you're not able to drive, be sure that you arrange for transportation in advance so that you're not panicking that day or trying to make a lot of calls that day. Also encourage people, if you want to participate in an event, you want to bring a dish, you want to bring something to the party, so to speak, it may not be the day to just go all out. Don't make your recipes that everybody knows that's what you brought. Offer to bring paper products, offer to bring drinks, offer to bring something that's a little more manageable for you or something that you could prepare in advance and freeze or something that you could purchase already made. So those are just some tangible ways to make things a little more manageable. So whenever we're grieving, grief tends to take up a lot of space in our mind, but it takes up a lot of our energy as well. And so we may make those commitments on a really good day, but when the day rolls around, we may be struggling a little more. And so if we try to prepare to do a little less, or you may, if you are the one hosting and you want to continue to try to host, you may cut back that guest list or ask people to help you. If you're the one that always does it all, ask for some help and some support this year.
So lots of little things. It's not about big things or skipping Christmas or skipping Thanksgiving. It's just some small changes.
Right. Yeah, and the thing about that I think makes the holidays different is it's not one day. So we know that whenever we lose a loved one, their birthday is challenging. We know that when we lose someone special, our own birthday is challenging. Or if there's some sort of anniversary or special days or days of remembering just of special events with that person, we know that those days are very difficult. What's different about the holidays is that it's an entire season. So I was trying to take note this year. I think the earliest that I saw December holiday decorations in a store was in August. And so it's not a day, it's not a week, it's not a month. It's an entire quarter of a year at least. And so it's day after day that there's reminders, that there's events, that there's trying to figure out what I'm going to do or how I'm going to handle this. And so we just say prioritize, figure out what's most important. And if other things can be added to that, great. And if they can't, that's okay too.
And you're going to be holding some classes. I don't know if class is the right word.
Maybe just some educational opportunities.
Educational opportunities. It's almost, I feel like when you teach a class, Kimberly, it's almost like a get-together with good conversation. I know that's a lot to put on a sign. But anyway, about coping with the holidays.
Correct.
Tell us about those.
So those are 1 hour opportunities where we do, we certainly have a curriculum, we have an outline and things that we're going to cover intentionally, but we do have some open discussion time because we all deal with holidays, we all deal with this season differently. There's so many factors that come into play, and so things just like what we've been talking about, traditions, or how do I decide what I'm going to do or not do. And so we talk about very practical things. We talk about suggestions. One of our biggest tips is that if you go to an event, don't block your car in because if you get upset or you get tired and you need to leave, you don't want to have to ask 20 people to move a car. And so think about things like, what time am I going to get there? What time am I going to want to leave? How am I going to get there? How am I going to leave? How am I going to have transportation? All of those things are really important in the holiday season. And so we certainly talk about the logistics, but we give some practical suggestions. And then we do have time for discussion because everyone's situation is different.
And those are important. And those you have listed on your website, the
Correct.
dates and times.
Correct.
Because you're going to do several.
We will do several. We also will do some via Zoom for folks that don't have transportation or are still not comfortable being in a group setting. We will do some in person. We'll have some in our Valdez office, some in our Hudson location, and some in our High Country location as well. So there's several opportunities. They are all listed on our website under events and happenings.
In your role, you provide services all year long. It's not just a session during the holidays. Tell us about your general grief support.
Okay. Grief support services, we have 2 programs. We have hospice bereavement support. That is for folks who have had a loved one in our hospice and palliative care program. And then we have community bereavement support as well. And so those are for folks who have had a loss that was not connected to a hospice or palliative care patient. So anybody who's in need of grief support services can contact us at our hospice office. And we will determine which program and what services are available, but we do individual face-to-face support. We have started some grief support groups back, and so we'll have some opportunities for those in January and then again in the spring. And so we provide grief support to people of all ages.
And people can learn more about your grief support on the Amorem, not hospice, Amorem website, correct?
Yes, and that's amoremsupport.org.
So that's a great place to go and find out what's happening when, or to get that phone number to Amorem and learn about their grief support.
Correct. And all of our agency-wide information is there. So if you go to events and happenings, you'll see the information about coping with the holidays, but there's also like advanced care planning workshops. There's stuff that's not specific to grief support services as well located there.
And Amorem has a lot to offer.
Correct.
So definitely go check out their website. Kimberly, is there anything else we've forgotten that we need to cover?
I can't think of anything, but we do know that everyone's situation is unique and everyone's losses are different, and how we respond to those are unique to us and our support system and our value system. And so we really try to focus on helping the individuals. And so if you have a specific need, you're welcome to reach out to us and we'll help you figure out some specifics for you.
Kimberly, thank you for what you're doing here, and thank you for your work at Amorem.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.